Hi, this is Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and welcome to Job Search Radio on webtalkradio.net. This is a time where I like to spend about 30 minutes talking with a guest about some aspect of job search, because to me, job hunting doesn't have to be hard, difficult, or painful, or take as long as it does for so many of you. So my guest this week is Ben Sands, the founder of Regret-Free Life, which on the web is located at regretfreelife.net, a resource designed to help men and women better align their values and passions with the work they do. His first book, the best-selling Regret-Free Personal Finance, was published and is available on Amazon. So Ben, welcome to Job Search Radio. Great to have you on.
Hey Jeff, it's a real pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, Ben, I'm puzzled. Why would someone who does what you do, namely career coaching for men and women in the world, write a first book about personal finance? To me, that tends to be the last thing people tend to think of when they think of job hunting or career changing.
It's a great question, Jeff, and I think that's precisely why I wrote the book. The short story is, over the last few years, I've worked with hundreds of incredibly talented men and women looking for new and better professional opportunities. And when we've sat down and begun our work together, the first question I always ask is, why aren't you doing what you love to do today? And typically, Jeff, there's three responses. Number one is, I don't know what that is. Right? I don't know what my dream job or what I would love to do is. Number two, I don't know how to get it. I may know what it is, but I'm not quite sure how to get there. And number three is, I know what it is. I even know how to do it. I just can't afford to yet.
The old money problem.
Indeed. It's a sort of simple form. My background is management consulting. That's essentially a simple root cause analysis as to why a lot of men and women who otherwise want to be excited and energized every day as they wake up and go off to work aren't. So I decided to tackle the money problem of those three. Tackle that one first because, frankly, Jeff, that's the easiest one to solve for.
And it's funny, in our culture in the U.S., money is one of those taboo subjects that we never talk about. And I know in my work as a headhunter, money is often one of the most pivotal things, not just simply because of the offer, but for the individual who's laid off, for example, and they don't start working on their financials immediately, how money comes back to bite them in the butt because they don't have the financial staying power, and the result winds up being that they wind up being forced to accept things that they'd really prefer not to. In fact, having to, quote, take a job, when in fact they really should be going for the thing that really floats their boat and gets them excited. Is that what you see in your practice?
Yeah, and it's popular, particularly in coaching circles, but you hear this at the bar or the restaurant, to ask folks, what would you do if money weren't an option? Right? To start to brainstorm a bit about what the next great job might be. And I certainly think that question is fine from a thought generation point of view. But the simple truth is money is always an object. And a better question is, how can I afford to do work that I don't need to be paid for? And so I like to start in this process is to get straight on what the financial foundation looks like, to help people differentiate between the money that they need to live and buy the things that make their life better, and the money that they would like to have because they think it imbues some kind of status or upward profile in their organization, community, family, you name it. Money is a complicated subject, and I like to get people talking about it as a first step in addressing it.
So it's the difference between, to give an example, the lease for the Mercedes and having the Subaru. The difference between having the expensive home with the expensive overhead and the lesser home for which you can sell the other one to help finance you for your next move. Is that what you're speaking of, or are there other things?
That is what I'm speaking of. But just to be clear, If you want a new Mercedes or BMW or Ferrari for that matter, and that is very clearly aligned with who you are, what your values and beliefs are, by all means, get the Mercedes or the Ferrari. What I find, though, Jeff, is that many people don't fully understand how money drives their decision-making. And the career choice is just one of many different decisions that we make with financial implications. Another good example is to have kids or not, to get married or not, to buy or rent a home. All of these are affected by your beliefs and values as it relates to money. My concern is that, one, you're aware of what those beliefs and values are, that you are aware of what kind of value you associate with having money or the things that money can buy. And two, that you use that awareness to make a great decision about what you're going to do next, both professionally and personally.
Often, again, I'm trained as a therapist as well as being a headhunter and career coach. It's people start to put the train on the tracks, and the tracks just go in one direction. And it's hard for them to put the brakes on for a second and go, whoa, let's stop for a second and take a moment to think about these things and what the impact of all these choices are. And that sounds like what you're speaking of here, to take a moment and get real clear and real conscious about the impact of the choices. So whatever the choice is that you make, it's a good one made consciously.
I couldn't have said it better, Jeff. Yeah, conscious decision-making, conscious choice, how we spend our time, how we spend our money. These are the things that map back directly to how we feel at the end of each day. Have we had a successful day? Have we had a fulfilling day? And at its core, that's a function of how we've spent the 24 hours within, and how we've spent our resources accordingly. So the conscious choice and conscious decision-making, Jeff, is at the core of what I do. This idea of a regret-free life means we wake up at the end of our life or at the end of any given day and say, I just spent my time, energy, and resources in a way that is absolutely consistent with who I am and what I value. I wouldn't have changed a thing.
Beautiful, and I couldn't have put it any better myself. So when I think of this process, I know it could happen for a regular job change, but I also think of it in the context of the career changer in particular, who has to weigh lots of different alternatives and choices between remaining in a career that doesn't leave them quite as satisfied or changing to something different for which there's, I have to say, emotional risk, because most people do wind up being successful with the changes that they make. Emotional risk from the fear of failure or the fear of losing it all. Is that what you run into in your practice? How does it affect the people that you coach?
It's absolutely true within the context of my practice that fear about what the transition, what the change might mean, how things might go, is at times debilitating for even the most talented, driven, motivated men and women. Many of the folks with whom I work, Jeff, have gone to four-year colleges. Most have graduate degrees. Most have achieved some level of professional success in at least one, if not multiple fields. The fear of not being as successful in the next transition is a heavy one. And even though that perception, hey, I could be waking up and doing work that I would do for free, is still hard to wrap your head around when the other side of your brain is saying, yeah, but you also stand a pretty good chance of falling flat on your face. So this is where this conscious decision-making comes in and regret-free decision-making comes in, Jeff. And I often take people to the end of their life and ask them to look back, reflect on the life that you've lived to date. How satisfied would you be if this is all that you've accomplished, this is all that you've done, how satisfied would your family be if you continued on these railroad tracks, to use your metaphor, Jeff, for the next 20, 30, 40 years? And it's often that forward-looking perception of regret, Jeff, that motivates people to say, you know what, it does scare me a bit to try this something new, but what scares me even more is the idea that I could wake up 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 2 years from now, and nothing's changed.
A very unsatisfying life, to say the least, and leaving people remarkably disappointed and saddened. I'm not a young man anymore. I'm in my 60s, believe it or not. And, I start to think of these topics because you come to the realization at some point in your life that a lifetime is not a long time. And we like to think of ourselves as being immortal, and life has a way of proving to us how ridiculous we are to hold those beliefs, consciously or unconsciously. So I've started to think myself about, what do I want to do? Where do I want to go during that time that's left for me? And I'm sure many of my listeners, whether they're 20, 60s, or 80s, are thinking the same way about making good choices so that what remaining time is left for each of us, we use it in ways that are good for our own purposes, based upon our own definition, not because of the shoulds and the other sort of imposed criteria from the society at large. You know what I mean by that, the expectations that others place upon ourselves or we're placed upon us.
Absolutely. And these expectations build from, it seems today, Jeff, as early as middle school. I know my own personal experience. Gosh, we were talking about colleges and going to a great school from grade 6 on. And I worked my tail off to get in and out of a tier 1 college. And it was a great experience by all means, but it was on that backside. I went to Duke. On the backside of my 4 years at Duke, all of a sudden I faced a world where there wasn't any prescription, right? I could become a lawyer or a doctor or a consultant. But ultimately, the choice was mine, how to spend my time, energy, and resources going forward. And for me, and I suspect that there are people listening today that sometimes we need some kind of catalytic moment, whether it's getting laid off or whether it's the death in the family, that just kind of wakes us up, says, hey, knucklehead, right? Life is short. You got to get living. And for me, that happened a year out of college in September 2001. I was living in New York City, and the first plane flew over my head on 9/11, and really just completely transformed the way I thought about life and the choices that I was making, both personally and professionally. So if there are folks who are on the listening today who feel like they've just been kicked in the shin, maybe blindsided by a layoff or a personal setback, I often find that especially in my coaching practice, that this becomes a great gift. It certainly was for me, and for many of my clients who did experience an unexpected layoff or a personal tragedy setback. Right? It's a gift in as much as it wakes us up, and it's life. It's the universe saying, hey, life's short and not fully in your control. So choose make your choices well. And I think that's it's a pretty big gift.
Choose them consciously and wisely. Beautifully said, Ben. Folks, you're listening to Job Search Radio on webtalkradio.net. We're going to be back with more from Ben Sands in a moment, but I want to talk with you about my job search insider tip for this week. And this time I want to talk with you about resumes, because I know many of you spend a lot of time fixated on making your resume beautiful and perfectly worded, and including everything about your life imaginable to the point where it becomes way too long. And in all candor, if you have a resume that's running beyond, let's say, 2.5 pages, if it were printed out, you've gotten to the point where your resume is too long. And I know in some fields, the 7 to 10 page resume is the norm, so work with that number as being the limit for your field. But for most industries, 2.5 pages is about it. So I want to suggest to you a way to start pruning your resume if it's gotten to that stage where people are thinking of putting a binder on it and publishing it in book form. So the simplest thing to do is, for most of you, you're not going to be hired based upon events that occurred more than 10 years ago. It is so extraordinarily rare that someone's hired based upon that. Most people, if they are, they try to keep it a secret because it uses experience so old or so obsolete as to be embarrassing. So if you have a resume that extends past 10 years, the simplest thing to do is to consolidate it into 1 or 2 sentences. It might say, prior experience was as a fill in the blank for the title, working for fill in the blank names of the firms, from, and you put in the dates there. That simply. You could have 5 firms listed there. Prior experience was in, let's say it's a 10 or 15 year span. Working for so-and-so, where I did this, that, or this or that. Just consolidate it into 1, maybe 2 sentences tops, and you'll wind up shortening your resume tremendously and getting people focused on the things that are most important when they're looking to hire you. Not the stuff from your antiquities, but the things that you've done more recently. So that's my tip for this time. Let me come back to Ben Sands. Ben, we've already covered a lot of territory, but now we got to get down to some even more meaty stuff. And what I think about is, how do people start engaging in the decisioning about what's important to them, what isn't important, prioritizing different alternatives? When you work with your coaching clients, how do you engage them in this self-reflection or self-assessment?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, Jeff. So, very simply, I approach it as, many management consultants would approach a business strategy problem. And again, my background in management consulting, for those who are not familiar with management consulting, consultants get paid to help companies improve performance. And that can either be by driving revenue, increasing sales, could be cutting costs, or it could be setting and defining a new path forward, a new strategy. So when a coaching client comes to me and says, I think I want to make a change, and really it's more of an assumption, I want to make a change. The first step is to clarify, what will success look like if in fact we make this change and it's the right change. So
you don't start them off with what's wrong with their current situation. You go right into the next thing.
Not at all. Always starting with keeping the end in mind. I think that was a Stephen Covey, one of his 7 habits of highly successful people. But it's also a foundational premise of business management, right? Define the metrics that we're trying to move, the needles that we're trying to move up or down, and then from there, let's develop a plan that will get us there in the shortest amount of time and at the lowest cost. Beautiful. Jeff, I just add, right, once you do that, the reason we start with the end is because in maybe 30% of my coaching engagements, we find that the first thing to do, right, before we change jobs is to consciously modify the job that they are already in, the individual is already in. There's an often time my clients come to me with a sense that the job they are in is unchangeable, right? It will never change. Therefore, I must leave. And while that may be the case in certain situations, as part of this regret-free decision-making process, If we identify a way that we could improve the job that you're in today so as to create better outcomes, right, to create a job that's more consistent with the one that you want, we start there. Sometimes it's a structured conversation with your manager. Other times it's the development of new skills that could be applied in a different area of the company that you're in. But we always start with the lowest cost change, right? And oftentimes that's fixing or improving where you are as opposed to totally jumping ship and doing something new.
Fascinating. So the first solution, and again I'm recapping for the listeners, isn't to immediately rush out to the next thing, but to see if there can be improvement done in the current circumstances to create the climate that will be satisfying to the potential job changer. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
So if that doesn't work, what becomes the next step?
So the next step is helping, or is to define what are the options? What are my options from a career next step perspective? And where I take my coaching clients as a first part of this process is to define two things. One, what do I need to learn in this next great job? Remember, thinking about this from keeping a long-term perspective here, the foundation of regret-free life is that knowledge is power. Right? The individuals who have the greatest sense of job security are those individuals who have the greatest collection of rare and valuable skill. Become a master in something that others value, and you will always have paid work. So when we start talking about the job change or transition, I always bring my clients back first to what will be your rare and valuable skill. And what next step will put you in a position to most quickly gain those skills.
And that's beautifully put, Ben, because so many people, because of, I think, the pounding that they take at their current firms, start to get into that, I don't know if this is quite a word, mediocritization of themselves. They become average and ordinary because they become cogs in some system. And what I hear you talking about is encouraging the exceptional to resurface again. What makes them great? What makes them unique? Identifying the why for what they're going to be doing next rather than just simply going through the motion of the next thing. It's going to really be the same as the last thing, but with a different shingle or some other label.
Absolutely, Jeff. I love that articulate. Encouraging the exceptional to shine forth again. That's exactly right. And so the question becomes, well, what do we need to change to allow that to happen? And you used the expression of understanding why the individual is doing what they do. Your sense of why, or your and the meaning or the purpose behind that which you do is an absolute critical component to achieving not mediocrity but mastery, right? To moving past mediocrity and into the exceptional zone. I had a manager in my early career who always used to say, there's never any traffic on that extra mile. And when you're going the extra mile, right, putting in that extra effort, extra time, extra energy, on one hand you understand how that works and why it's valuable. But the truth is, in order to be willing to do so, that work, that investment, there has to be some connection to that which is meaningful to you. Some connection to your values and beliefs. So that is the aspiration to move out of that zone of mediocrity into the zone of mastery, and in doing so, create lasting job security and success.
But I'm going to not make as much money as I used to. I don't know if I can do this. Help me. And I can't tell you how many people I've heard that from.
And this is why we go back to Regret-Free Personal Finance, the book that I just wrote. Right? Because I get the same thing. I got the same thing too many times to allow that myth to perpetuate. Right? Tell me, how much do you need to live a lifestyle that you feel comfortable living? Right? For most people, that number is actually less than they imagine. Now, there are some horrible financial practices that we often have to remedy in order to create a more sustainable cash flow position for people who are willing, who want to go that extra mile, but may have to make a choice between building skill and building their nest egg. But Jeff, my experience, and I'd be curious to hear yours, those individuals that invest in skill building, that invest in expertise and mastery, cognizant of kind of how that, making sure it's the right kind of mastery, right? Underwater basket weaving will still never pay. But those people who invest in mastery are almost always rewarded with long-term financial security. Now, it may not be a gajillion dollars, right? There's only a handful of careers that will create transcendent wealth. But if you're looking to wake up every day confident in knowing that you have enough money to pay for the things that bring greatest value and happiness to you and your family, there's no safer route than building skill.
I found in my work, and again, I've been in recruiting for more than 40 years, there's a price that we pay for every decision that we make. Sometimes it's a financial price, sometimes it's an emotional price. But getting very clear about what the consequence will be of the choice allows people a certain level of freedom. Doesn't mean that they don't come back and go, oh, that fork in the road, if only, before they snap themselves back. But you're right, regret-free living is so critical because, again, I remember being in my 20s, and now I'm not. It comes a lot faster than most people think. So It's very important to start having this conversation with yourself sooner rather than later.
And I would say, Jeff, it's not risk-free living. Right? There's no way to eradicate risk in one's life. And what I find is there's lots and lots of people who try to do so, using careers and money as the walls of their castle, so to speak. The metaphor that I use, we build castles to protect us from risk, from uncertainty in our life. But there's no way to eradicate risk in one's life. The only thing they can control is regret, right? And the only way to do that is by getting very, very clear. And this is not sort of a one-time thing, right? As you grow older and wiser, your values and beliefs tend to change with new experience and the passing of time. But to constantly stay in tune with who you are and what you need, right, in your life, in the life of your family at any given point in time, and then to make decisions that give you the best chance of meeting those needs, both personally and professionally.
Ben, we're starting to come up on the end of our time with one another. Is there one more piece of advice that you want to share with the audience that we haven't covered so far? The super big one that you've been holding out on them?
I think I did share the super big one. And that, I reiterate, I just wrote a blog on my website, regretfreelife.net, where I featured what I characterize as the best piece of career advice ever. And I'd encourage your readers to go to the website and take a look at that blog because it is absolutely worth the read. But the second best piece of career advice I can offer is this. All things being equal, don't pick the job, don't pick the company, pick the person. Pick your next boss and be very, very discriminating. more than any other factor as it relates to our personal and professional growth, the person whom we are working most closely with will have the greatest impact, positive or negative, on what we're able to accomplish while working with them and what we're able to accomplish in the future that we have, after that relationship. So I always say to folks, if you're struggling to know what that perfect next job is, or to find the job at the perfect next company, think about your network and ask yourself, all things being equal, if I could work for just one person, right, or work directly with one person, who would I choose and why? And then start your job search with an email to them.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. Ben, thank you. This has been an interesting interview, not just simply for the audience, but for me personally as well. How can people reach you for coaching or for more information?
Sure thing. So my website, again, regretfreelife.net, is the best way to connect with me. My personal email address is ben@regretfreelife.net. And if folks are just interested in chatting, I do offer a free 20-minute consultation just to talk about where you are and where you're going and what the right next steps might be. It may be coaching with me, but it very well could be something else. And I'm happy to give you the best of what I've got in that 20-minute session and then help you figure out what the right next steps are from there. You can schedule a free session with me, again, through my website under the About section or Get Coaching section of the website.
Ben, thank you. I really appreciate you making time today. And folks, we'll be back next time to chat about some other aspect of job search. I'm Jeff Altman, the Big Game Hunter, and Ben's conversation with me reminded me of something I had a conversation with a coaching client years ago who came to me, a finance guy on Wall Street, very successful, and an uncle of his who was a composer in the 1920s came to him, had just passed away. And my friend came to me and said, I just don't want to die with the music inside of me. Somewhere in this financier was touched by the music that had existed in his family and just didn't want to lose sight of that part of himself and came to me for advice and coaching to help him make that next move. So I just want to say that if you're looking for information about job hunting, you can come to my website. There's tons of content there. The website address is thebiggamehunter.us. There are videos from YouTube, information about job hunting in video format. Podcasts of this show are there. You can receive a complimentary subscription to my e-zine, which is called No BS Job Search Advice e-zine. There's lots of things that will help you there. But if you're more interested in coaching from me, you can reach me through VIPpersonalsearch.com for regular monthly coaching or for a one-time session. If you have a couple of questions about some aspect of job hunting, you can reach me through liveperson.com. That's LIVE person.com, where I'm a job search and career coaching expert. So lots of ways to find out